So, hey guys, today we're going to be talking about a pretty simple ruling. So, did you guys know there is actually a difference between flip summon and flipping? So, flipping counts as a lot of things, flip summoning, kind of janky. So, one of the things about flip summoning is that technically you can flip summon up to 5 times per turn, and this would require you to have all of your monster zones just filled with face down monsters. Technically, you could flip summon them 5 times, unlike with special summoning, which has no cap, and normal summon, which you could technically, well, there is technically no hard limit to normal summon, but you would need to like loop it, which is just technically possible, right? With like an ultimate offering and then like some way to loop your life points, you can technically achieve infinite normal summons. But for the most part, you're going to be limited to one normal summon. But if we're thinking in terms of loops, then technically you could have an infinite number of normal summons and an infinite amount of special summons, without a doubt. But with flip summons, you don't really have an unlimited amount per turn because you to perform a flip summon, you would need to set a monster card. This would either have to be done on your opponent's turn or your turn before your opponent's turn. And then when it becomes your turn again, you should be able to then flip summon whatever the face down monster was, right? And this is because you're allowed to change the position of monsters, and I don't know of any effect that allows you to just freely multiple times change the position of a monster. Technically, you could probably flip a monster face down and face up multiple times, and you could probably even loop it. But even if you do that, that is not counted as a flip summon. And a few things worth mentioning about flip summons is one, you can actually solemn a flip summon. So, for example, let's assume we're playing against Stun and I am playing, we'll go with Kashtira. So, this will be a little bit complicated, but let's say I'm playing Kashtira against Stun, and they probably have a Solemn Judgment, because why wouldn't they? And they have something like probably a Barrier Statue. If only I could spell Barrier Statue. Okay. So let's say maybe they have Barrier Statue with Inferno. Sure. Then, if I were to normal summon this Kashtira Rysart, it will just get Solemn Judgmented. If I set this Rysart and then my opponent does nothing and I flip over Rysart on a later turn, it will also get Solemn Judgmented. And you would likely do this because you know as a Kashtira player, they would not have that many normal summons unless they have access to Birth, which you can also Solemn Judgment. But yeah, that aside, the way I prevent getting Solemn Tier is simply to set Kashtira Rysart and wait for my opponent to attack into the Rysart. So, cool. Barrier Statue is going to attack into Rysart, and then Rysart gets flipped over. But in this case, this is not counted as a flip summon, it is simply flipped. And this is even more notable if we have something like a Hanzo, which has the specific effect hero. When this card is flip or special summon, as in flip summon, right? That's what this card is saying right here. If you flip this card, it actually does genuinely nothing. So flip or special summon, so flip summon. So if you were to flip over Hanzo in the same kind of way, so if I were to attack into Hanzo, you actually do not get a search from Hanzo. Now, if I were to change the battle position of face down Hanzo by changing it into a forceful attack position, it would also not trigger because it was flipped face up, but not flip summoned, which is kind of awkward, but you know. Ruling moment, Hanzo does not trigger. If we were to instead have someone like Alistair the invoker, Alistair actually specifically says if this card is normal summoned or flip face up. So if we were to flip summon Alistair, it also triggers if it gets attacked into, or if we change its battle position with a card effect. All of these things will trigger Alistair. So essentially, if something triggers on flip summon, it's strictly just a downgrade from a type of effect that triggers specifically when a card is flipped. So yeah, that's essentially what that means. Now, to make things even more complicated, if we go back to Riseheart has this effect that says, during your main phase, if this card was normal or special summoned this turn, you can banish one Kashtira card from your deck except for Kashtira Riseheart. Banish the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck face down, and if you banish any, this card's level becomes 7. So this makes me want to ask the simple question of, if I have a set Kashtira Riseheart and I flip summon it, it was technically not normal summoned, nor was it special summoned this turn. And in fact, you could even say it was set like turn 1. So technically, this effect here is not activatable unless you normal summon Riseheart, right? In this case, in general, right? But if we were to specifically, let's say, set Kashtira Riseheart and then flip it face up with a card effect on the same turn with, I don't know, let's say AD Changer, sure. Is Kashtira Riseheart activatable now? Well, now, the only action that I did with Kashtira Riseheart was I set Kashtira Riseheart. So it's that now it's not normal summoned, it's not special summoned, it was not flip summoned either. So technically, you could even say I never summoned Kashtira Riseheart. Just period, right? Because setting a card is not actually summoning a card, which is entirely different, which is where we can bring in Last Warrior from Another Planet, or Rongo Miniad, for example. So if we bring up Rongo Miniad here, Rongo Miniad says, your opponent cannot normal or special summon monsters, and this is freaky because I genuinely don't remember if you can flip summon under Rongo Miniad, but since Rongo Miniad only specifies normal or special summon monsters, my assumption here is that you should be able to set, for example, let's say Kashtira Riser, and then flip it face up on a later turn, assuming it doesn't get destroyed by battle. And then you would be able to flip summon it because it does not count as a normal or special summon. Or we could flip it maybe by card effect, which is not a summon altogether. And then we have your opponent cannot normal or special summon monsters on both of these cards. Well, actually, wait. Against Last Warrior, though, we cannot summon monsters, period. So we can still set under Last Warrior from Another Planet because it doesn't specify setting. But because this one says you cannot summon monsters, it means you cannot flip summon, because technically a flip summon is still a summon, as you know, with Solemn Judgment. So technically I would not be able to flip summon like Kashtira Riseheart, but I would under Rongo Miniad, which is freaky to think about, honestly. But alright, you can do that. And then let's see. Under Last Warrior from Another Planet, I could still flip my card via effect though, which I'm not really sure how that would matter. But also, if Last Warrior from Another Planet were to attack my monster, we're going to assume its defense is higher than Last Warrior's attack, then that would enable me to kind of have a monster on my field once again, via Last Warrior flipping that monster over. Which is just pretty brutal how strong Last Warrior from Another Planet is, honestly. Didn't realize it was actually this bad, so even if I tribute set a monster, well, I can't flip it over. So the only thing I can do with that monster is tribute set over it again, really. Wow. Brutal. And the only action you can take with your monsters is well, aside from like activating them in hand, activating in graveyard, and all that stuff, it's just setting them. You can't normal, you can't special. Hmm. All right. Flip summoning, pretty funky. And then this ruling, I'm not even 100% sure on this. It might have been broken earlier in Master Duel's release, but let's say I have a Baron de Flor. All right, I special summon my Baron de Flor. It gets hit with a Book of Moon. So, you know what? I'm okay with that, of course, because, you know, if I were to negate it, it doesn't really do anything for me. It would be like kind of negative, so I let it happen. Then next turn, I try to flip summon Baron de Flor. Boom, Solemn Judgment on the Baron. So Baron, at some point, would not count as being properly summoned after getting hit by the Solemn. So if I had a Monster Reborn type effect, I would not be able to special summon the Baron, which is especially freaky. So not really sure how to deal with that. But also, now that I think about it, if you did have the Last Warrior from another planet, and then you were to do like a Book of Eclipse type effect on your opponent's monsters, they would be set face down and they would not be able to be flip summoned. Well, I didn't even think about that till just now, but wow. That's really obnoxious, isn't it? Huh. Well then, with all of this stuff, it's just, alright, flip summoning. Kinda jank. And as of currently, I'm not really sure if flip summoning is supposed to overwrite a monster that's been properly special summoned, and you're supposed to be able to summon them back with after getting solemned or not. Just no clue. I haven't tested it since because yeah, it really never comes up where you get actually Book of Moon or some kind of like effect like that, and then you get hit by a solemn on flip summon. It really doesn't come up, does it? So yeah, that's all I got for you guys today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.